Welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time, to the Wrestling with the Faith podcast. We're a group of everyday people, everyday Christians get together. We discuss passages from the Bible and how they apply to our modern day lives. My name is Evan. I'm joined as always by Dave and Laurel, and we are joined again by Dick Carty. Dick, thank you for joining us. This week, we're going to be discussing Genesis 9, 8 through 17. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will a life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. So God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant, and I have established between me and all life on earth. So I guess obviously we're talking about the covenant God made. This is coming on after the great flood, and the story of Noah and the ark, gathering two of each creature onto his great ark that he built. And God saying, okay, yeah, it's not going to happen again. And using a rainbow as kind of his sign to remind himself, hey, I'm not going to do that again. So I guess maybe one question, not diving into it quite yet, but how often have you guys seen rainbows while you're out and about?
Lots.
That's a good question. Yeah, I've seen them.
Yeah, I still remember, of course, every little girl loves rainbows, I swear. My daughter drew so many rainbows when she was growing up. It was unbelievable.
I remember seeing a double one fairly recently, I think in the last year or so. We could see it from our yard. That was pretty amazing.
I remember when I was little, when I read this passage, I thought that God created rainbows for that reason. But when you just read it again, I realized it says that when you see the rainbow in the sky, this is what it means. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm creating the rainbow to make that, and so, which I think is a interesting distinction, since we kind of know scientifically what a rainbow is and how it, because it's water and the reflection and of light. And so I thought that is really kind of cool. It just hit me. It seems like no matter how old you get, you hit something else hits you. But because I always thought that it was, this is this is what it says in the Bible, that God created the rainbow for that reason, as opposed to when you see the rainbow, this is what it means.
It could be too, like we've talked about on previous episodes, and I think even offline, that with so many different variations of the Bible, obviously I've usually, when I'm reading the passages, I'm using BibleGateway.com, which has 50 of them on there at your disposal, but kind of defaults to the new international version. So it could be one of those, whatever version you may have been listening or reading when you were growing up could have said that, versus this is saying, okay, this is to me is leaning more towards rainbows already existed. He's just, I'm going to pick that thing as a sign of beauty and a sign of the covenant, that's going to be my reminder, to not let the floodgates open, so to speak.
So one of the other things I've noticed with the story of Noah is this relationship with creatures of the earth, and how this idea. So I guess something I struggle with sometimes is this idea of, there are some faith traditions that talk about, beasts of burden being just to serve man. Others talk about, well, we're really, God is also asking us to, protect the planet. I mean, what do we think about any of that? Is that really what this message is really all about, or what is it really all about?
Yeah, I guess talking about, beasts of burden, and those, talking about those that are on the earth to serve us, which, I mean, I think it's one, you get a lot of the talk throughout of even Jesus is in to serve us, and it's like, we should be serving each other. So it's while, yeah, the animals may be, like the donkey was used to help pull, carts around, help move stuff. We shouldn't be mistreating them. But I think with this passage particularly is talking about God saying he's not going to kind of bring about a calamitous event to wipe all life off the face of the earth, as opposed to, I mean, maybe how we interact day to day, but I think it's one thing.
As you wrestle with your faith, do you ever wonder if these stories are true?
Yeah, I mean, so every religion, or at least most religions, have some flood story in their texts. I didn't realize that until actually Pastor Sherman actually kind of talked about that most of them have a flood story. So I wonder, was there a huge flood and each of them had their own story for it, or was it a common story? I don't know. Is it just a story, or was it really literally just like described?
Well, we know,
yeah,
we know in the Bible there are both types of stories. There are stories that aren't real. They're metaphors, and they're written as metaphors. And then there are historical stories. And one of the wonderful things about our faith, Christianity, is that it's a faith of history. It's documented. It's said that the story of Jesus has been as documented as many of the great figures in history. And what does that mean? Well, it means eyewitnesses to the story. So over the years, people have wrestled with their faith to say, okay, is the Bible well-meaning group of stories that aren't real? Or is the Bible real? Is history really being recorded here? It's easy for us to look at the New Testament and the history. One of the great historians is Luke. He wrote a gospel, and he wrote the story, documented the story of Acts, the new church. But the Old Testament is a little different because it goes way back before written word. So many of these things were experienced, but they weren't written down at the time. So they had to be written down later, and they had to be told to the person. That's where Christians believe that these are God's words that inspire the writers. And we don't know who the writers are in many cases. We know the first 5 books were attributed to Moses, but we really don't know for sure. So it comes down to that age-old question that even has a lot of variances within Christian denomination. Do you believe, if we are wrestling with our faith, do we believe that the Bible is God inspired? And do we believe that everything in here, okay, that is meant to be a historical lesson is a historical lesson, and everything that's meant to be a metaphorical lesson is a metaphorical lesson? Years ago, I wrestled back and forth with this, and for a long time, one of my favorite authors, and I think I read 7 or 8 or 9 of his books, was Marcus Borg. And Marcus Borg didn't, even though he was a trained theologian, he didn't believe that these were true stories. He believed that they were true messages. In other words, the lesson to be learned, even though it wasn't a factual truth, was a real truth. And I kind of accepted that as a scientist. And I've kind of come away from that now. I am more to the fact that my faith says this is God inspired. Even with all the different versions and translations, the essence of all this is God inspired. And I came to the point where I said, I either believe it or I don't. I either believe it or I don't. And I've come down on the side, I believe it. And remember years ago when the Interact class discussed miracles. And sometimes when we look at the different miracles in the Bible, you say, well, how could that possibly happen? And if you're to believe the Bible, you're to believe those really happen. They're not just stories. They're not just metaphorical lessons. And I now understand the Bible in a different light than I did 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. And I believe as a scientist that things from outside of our realm of reality can happen. Because even the fact that God created the universe and everything in it, he wasn't in it when he created it. He was outside of it. And so why couldn't things from outside of it impinge on our universe today? So miracles and stories like the flood, I now believe are real stories. They are history that's told and retold. And for me, I guess that was a leap of faith. One of the neat things about this story is the covenant. We think of covenants, and two parties agree to find some benefit and adhere to it, and some penalty if they don't. But in this case, it's a one-sided covenant. God is he's not an angry God with the flood. He's almost remorseful. I'm going to wipe out everything except you guys. You get on that ark, and you save as many as you can, and you save yourselves, and we will start again. And I will do this. He doesn't say you, other than getting on the ark. You have to get on the ark. Other than that, the covenant of the rainbow and never to flood the world again, is a one-sided covenant.
Do we think that so let me ask you this: what do we think God is asking us to do after that? In other words, okay, I've saved this group. I've saved the animals. I've saved this select group of humans, right? And now you're going to start over is there some ask of God in terms of, how to operate the world, right? This idea of it was there, you were saying it's a one-sided covenant. Is there some thought of what God's asking us to do, in terms of the natural world?
Yeah, I think there's a hint of it here, but to me it's much more explained in Paul's letters in the New Testament, where specifically when he writes to the Romans, and we've been starting Romans in the men's, which is now men's and women's Bible study on Monday nights, and Paul's good news, which is Jesus Christ and his saving grace, is basically that the righteousness of God, okay, falls on us all through our faith. Those three things. Number one, the righteousness, the goodness of God and all that embodies. Second, it's of God. It's not of man. Okay? I can say, okay, I'm going to give you something. Well, that's different. I gave it to you. But the righteousness of God. And how do we accept that? Through faith. That's the third part. So he asks us to believe. That's really what he's asking us to do. To believe and to have eternal life. Not that I want to preach, but
yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I feel like the covenant itself, I mean, because like when I think of covenant, I mean, you thinking of it when it's brought up maybe in other senses too, it I mean, not necessarily the word I want to use, but like a contract almost. But it is that kind of one-sided where it's, as bad as humans can be and still are in a lot of cases, there's not something we'll do that'll break that covenant, I don't think. I mean, that's where I think it can be one-sided is there's not a way for us to break it because it's God's promise to us. But I mean, kind of, what Dick, what you were saying, it kind of is those three things, that faith and, maybe, and living our lives as, after with Noah starting new is following the 10 Commandments kind of thing, where I've brought up, in previous episodes and discussions that a lot of it all just kind of boils down to love. And so I think it's having that faith and having that love that is God's love for us, and showing that to all of those around us, whether they're human or they're animal or it's nature. It's shown that love.
Yeah, all the creations, okay, are God's creations, and he loves those creations just like he loves us.
Okay, so I have a really good friend of my daughter's who's practically like another daughter for me, who's vegan. Oh no, she's vegetarian.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons is because she really believes in this idea that we're hurting these animals, right? And so where are we with, okay, this idea of, I think Evan, I agree with the idea of we should live our lives in love, right? Whether it's love for our neighbors, it's love for our, obviously our families, but it's even love for our enemies, if you will. And even in the natural world, I mean, if you're doing everything out of love, you're not just haphazardly damaging, the world, right? And so I get that. But she takes this to a whole new level and kind of says, the fact that we milk cows and the fact that we slaughter beef and slaughter, animals to eat is, is exploiting them, if you will. And so no, now granted, you have to be in a wealthy country to even think this way. This is what I would say to you right now. There's no question. But what do we think about that? I mean, if we, is there some, where is that line where we're truly loving all other beasts of burden and all other animals and all other living things, and also eating a steak, right? And so I'm just, is there a point there? I have never thought that was an issue, right?
Mhm.
But when
Yeah.
others do.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, obviously we were talking about, the beasts of burdens and treating them with respect where, I'm thinking, you know, everybody, every person, every animal kind of has their purpose. So I think it's, to me, I don't have anything about like against, enjoying a good steak. Um, I just think it's, obviously in a lot of cases, especially where meat or whatever is mass produced, the animals aren't in the best condition. So I think that's kind of where it comes into is there, ways that we can get, and I know a lot of my friends that maybe aren't vegetarian or vegan, but, going to like a lot of the local butchers or farms and stuff that treat the animals better than a lot of like the mass production kind of slaughterhouses. But then, as we talk about technology and everything modern day, I hadn't had a chance to read the full article, but I think I just saw an article where somebody, I think it was like they 3D printed a ribeye steak using like living cells. So it was like the first like real meat kind of thing that was made without harming or harming an animal. And so it's, talking about that, it's weird. I see your face. I see it. Smart Dave. But I mean, seeing a lot of the stuff like that, and that there are companies investing in that kind of thing. I mean, I think, with where technology's going, that could certainly be a part of the future where, if they can get the blood cells, and you talk about 3D printing or like the cloning of like animal, like Dolly. I think, yeah, Dolly was the sheep's name, right? From a few years back.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Where it's stuff like that where, you're able to take a sample from an animal that doesn't hurt them, and yet we're still able to enjoy our steak.
So first, that scares me a little, frankly, that they're 3D in a steak. So I don't even know what to think about that. But and I get how people kind of think about more humane treatment, if you will. I don't know. I always thought that was weird to say humane treatment of an animal, but whatever. So I get all that, and I get free range is more healthy. There's lots of reasons to do it. I guess the thing I struggle with is, is the Bible really telling us to do that in any way? Is that really, is there a message in there? Or is this one of those things that isn't really addressed in the Bible, right? Isn't really something that we should turn to the Bible to explain. So there's a lot of discussion about, use the right tool for the right thing. If you're hammering a nail in, use a hammer. You can use a screwdriver and hit the end of it, but it takes a little longer and it's not as good for it. The Bible is really a great source to find out why we're here and why is it all about, but not necessarily always, what or how in a more, in a different way. So it's not always the right thing to look for every answer. If I want to change a light bulb, I don't look in the Bible to find out, did they have a section on light bulbs, right? I might go to my, home economics book. I don't know, whatever. But my point is, maybe that's not something that we should even be turning to the Bible for.
Well, one of the things you have to ask ourselves, or if the young lady were here, you could ask her, is where does her belief come from? What's the root of her belief? And then she'll say, well, I don't want to hurt anybody else. And then you say, well, why? And when you follow through the whys, you get to the root of her belief. In many cases, what you'll find is they're doing it because someone else is doing it, not because they have any root belief that's other than surface, surface deep. Does the Bible address or does the Bible allow eating of meat? And of course, it does. Even some of the covenants, with the Jews, where you can eat this, but you can't eat this. You can eat this, but you can't eat this. So what she's doing is going beyond what the Bible talks about. Now, if her base belief, as you uncover it, you peel it away like an onion, doesn't violate the Bible, and she wants to live her life that way, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with it. But a lot of times, you peel it away, and what you find, is the basis from another religion. Okay, or the basis from what we face in today's society, either modernism or postmodernism. You can sum up modernism. It grew out of the Enlightenment with science. Okay, that science is everything. Okay, and then came postmodern that says no, that's not the case. That's not the case. There is no right or wrong. Everybody has their own right or wrong. Okay, that kind of sums up the postmodern philosophy. I mean, there's more, but if you couple words, you can say it that way. We as Christians don't believe that at all. Okay, we certainly don't believe that the Bible is a science book, but we certainly look at the Bible and say it's consistent with what we know about science. And it's even more consistent today the more we know, which is the amazing thing. And for the postmodern, we say, no. There is a right and there is a wrong. And our Christian Judeo basis, the Bible, is what determines what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, I would push back a little on this. Well, so first, the person I'm thinking of, she would say just because of compassion, that's what she's about, and she wouldn't look to the Bible.
And for you and I, we would say, fine.
Yeah,
you can be compassionate.
Yeah, and I think she would say, well, that's not something I would look for in the Bible. I would look for other things, but I wouldn't look for that. And so I guess my suggestion is, the Bible gives us rights and wrongs for many things in life, but many things it doesn't really, because it doesn't discuss, like what color paint you should paint your room, right? Those aren't important enough, right? Those aren't the lifelong things we need. So the only piece that I was toying with a little bit there was is the Noah story this idea behind treating animals better, or was it really just a story of God's covenant and forgiveness of us and kind of starting over? And so I don't know what the answer to that is, but I just kind of when I look at that, and I see a lot of people kind of look to the Bible and look at it for something that's kind of obscure like that I'm saying, I don't know that that's the right source for that, right? The Bible can tell you to live in a particular way and it addresses many things, but I'm not sure it really addresses, other than you shouldn't be mean to your dog. I'm not sure it addresses whether you should take care of a dog or a cat or how you should do it. That's not really the source of information for that, if you will, necessarily. And so that's kind of a something that bothers me occasionally with people who kind of look and say, well, this is what I think the Bible's telling me to do for this particular situation. When I kind of feel like, well, that's probably not the source for that. I wouldn't turn to the Bible for, what color to paint my room. So.
No, exactly. Going back to that right or wrong takes us back even another step into what separates us from the animals. Okay. Let's, if I may just divert a little bit here. God created all these creatures, even the slimy ones that we don't want to touch. Okay, they're God's creatures. And we are different. Man is set aside different. And we ask, okay, how is man different? We see our pets, our cats, our dogs have little personalities. They are almost soulish, so to speak. They're little personalities. And I like to believe my dog's going to heaven. Okay, but in reality, the Bible said that we were created in God's image. And what does that mean? Does that mean there's some guy up in the sky that looks like Dick Hardy? I don't think so. Okay. I think what it means is God's mind. Okay. In our minds. And, and I don't think this runs counter to evolution. At some point, and even the Bible addresses it, there were people, there were Homo sapiens, or there were evolved beings, okay? And at some point, God imbued them with his likeness, and that's his mind. And he gave us, right from the beginning, when he did that, this moral code of right and wrong. We have that, okay? Most of us, if we'll admit it, know, pretty much what's right and what's wrong. And some people have said, well, that's why we have conscience, my conscience. Well, that's part of it. But that's what he gave us. And that's what sets us apart from the animals. So believing, as we do as Christians, our right and our wrong comes directly from God. Not driving on the right side of the road or the left side of the road, or this or that, okay? Or how to paint your room, okay? But what is right and what is wrong? And we basically have that. We know that. We grow up with it. It's part of us. And that's what sets us aside from the animals. Okay, we're in God's image in that way, in our minds. And yet science cannot define a mind. Okay, say, well, maybe physics can't, but maybe psychology can. Well, they're working on it, but they don't know what makes you like a green room rather than a blue room, or like this poetry versus that poetry. And science can't, the best of physics can't determine why a piece of art is good or bad. That comes from our mind. That's what God has given us. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, the ability, the discernment, right? The ability to kind of really make a decision on right and wrong. Yeah, that's, yeah.
And we keep refining it with our own rules, depending on where we live, and God said that's okay. You can do that, but keep in mind the basics. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Mhm. That love God, love people, right?
Yeah.
Said that a few times. There's a song out now that I like. It says that.
Well, I think that's as good of a place as any to end there, Evan. What do you think? Want to do a summary for us?
Oh boy.
Hmm.
What's our mission for this week?
Hmm.
Go out and use that ability to make decisions on right and wrong to the benefit of society. I don't know.
All right. Yeah. So how about for the bit of homework, as you're going about your day, kind of see where do you see God among all the life around you, and if there's something particularly beautiful, and especially if you happen to see, a rainbow, his sign of his covenant to us as you're going around. We'd like to see pictures. Send us some pictures. We want to see, where you see God in the living creatures around you. And so you can do that with through our social media accounts on Instagram and Facebook, and I don't know if we're on Twitter or not, but Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in Westlake, Ohio. We'd love to see and hear from you guys, both there and then in the comments section if you're watching this on YouTube. As always, let us know what your thoughts are on what we've discussed. If there's anything you'd like us to discuss during our podcast, during our discussions, and if there's anyone you'd like us to have on to wrestle with, we'd love to hear back from you. So as always, go see and love nature and love all those around you, and keep wrestling, everybody.